I've talked about the Touhou series quite a bit for this show, and for good reason. I find that its cast has some of the richest varieties of inspirational sources, both in details that are made obvious through the character designs, as well as lesser noticeable details from their behavior and spell card use. It's always a joy of mine to talk about another character from my favorite video game series, and today is another one of those such occasions. I've mainly stuck to the Touhou characters that have made repeat appearances in both the main series shooter games and the fighting game spin-offs, as I feel that those characters are the ones that get more fleshed out. Characters that make only one major appearance usually have their neat tidbits of background and inspiration, but it's usually not as much compared to the characters that have made more frequent appearances. That does not mean there cannot be exceptions, however. And the best example I can think of is Tenshi, a character who debuted in the fighting game spin-off Scarlet Wither Rhapsody. Though she was mainly intended to be the major antagonist of the story and the final boss character, there's a lot more that Tenshi brought to the table in her lone major appearance so far. So what all can we learn from a troublemaking celestial eager to find relief from the boredom of a life in a perfect world? I'm the Kitsune Hawk, and today we're going to take a closer look at the young mistress of Baba Agra, Tenshi Hinanawi. So get out your pencils, trivia enthusiasts, because this is character development. Tenshi is a character with a lot behind her design, so before we start anywhere with deciphering it, I need to explain her backstory first. Tenshi was originally a human under the name Chiko Hinanawi. The Hinanawi family was one comprised mainly of priests, and for their services and piety, they were allowed to ascend to the heavens, becoming immortal figures referred to as Celestials. Chiko, who was a young girl at the time she and her family became Celestials, changed her name to Tenshi. Unaware of how Celestials were expected to behave, combined with her sheltered upbringing, she developed something of a rebellious nature, eager to break the monotony of life in paradise by using her powers to cause earthquakes on the surface world of Ginsokyo, thus setting the events of Scarlet Wither Rhapsody in motion. Unsurprisingly, quite a bit can be taken from Tenshi's human and celestial names. Her first name as a human, Chiko, is spelled using two kanji that mean earth and child, so the two together would translate as Earth Child or Child of the Earth. Similarly, her celestial name, Tenshi, is spelled with two kanji, these translating as heaven and child. While the literal translation of these would be Child of Heaven, this term has also been interpreted as meaning monarch in both Chinese and Japanese. Changing the second kanji also makes the word Tenshi translate as angel in Japanese, with all three meanings of angel, child of heaven, and child of the earth applying to Tenshi's backstory. As for her last name, Hinanawi, it's formed from two instances of Old Japanese, hence why it's not entirely pronounced the way it's spelled. The first two kanji, which are pronounced Hina, could be taken from a deity, likely a goddess, named Hina Tori no Mikoto, who brought divine treasures down from the heavens and stored them within the grand shrine of Izumo, similar to Tenshi's ability to descend to the surface world from the heavens if she desires. The second part of her last name, which reads as Nai, is an archaic translation of the word earth. Alongside the word Naifuru, meaning earthquake, these two words are documented within the Nihon Shoki, one of the two oldest documentations of Japanese history dated to 720 CE. Put together, the meaning of Tenshi's full name comes out as the phrase Child of the Heavens, Goddess of the Earth. Moving on to her design, Tenshi has a more solid link to the folk legends of China from the use of peaches as a common symbol for her. Specifically, there's a long-standing Chinese myth about the peaches of immortality. These divine fruits were said to only ripen every 3,000, 6,000, and 9,000 years, and they were used for feasts held by immortal figures. Only two mortals were said to have allegedly feasted on these peaches: King Mu of the Western Zhou dynasty and Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty, the peaches either extending their lifespan or making them immortal, depending on the interpretation. This is reflected in Tenshi's backstory, with her being a human elevated to divine status, as well as her design, with the peaches on her hat. Said peaches are also referred to as the staple food of the heavens. Speaking of Tenshi's design, another common symbol for her is a rainbow, used as her sigil in Touhou Hisotensoku, but more obviously being on the hem of her dress. With regards to East Asian cultures, rainbows are often seen as bridges from the heavens to the earth, used by divine spirits to descend to the surface world, just as Tenshi was not only able to ascend into the heavens, but she's also able to descend back to the surface with nary an issue. Chinese and Japanese Buddhism offer another East Asian interpretation of rainbows, in which they are seen as symbolic of the state immediately prior to nirvana. This ties in very nicely to the specific name of the heavenly realm she resides in, Bhava Agra, which is borrowed from both Buddhism and Hinduism. The term Bhava is Sanskrit for emotion or state of mind, though if spelled a bit differently, it means origin, becoming, rebirth, or worldly existence, among other similar translations. Either way, the term is associated with the state after death and prior to rebirth, or if an individual has become enlightened, the state prior to nirvana. The term Bhava Agra in its entirety translates as summit of the existent world, furthering its background as a home for the enlightened and the immortalized. Another strong series of symbolism in Tenshi's design has to do with the Japanese deity Takemikazuchi, also known as Kashima. Takemikazuchi was considered to be a god of swords and thunder, but what he's most famous for are a series of Japanese woodblocks showing him pinning down giant catfish known as namazu. These catfish would cause earthquakes whenever they moved, so Takemikazuchi would descend from the heavens carrying either a sword or a large engraved stone called a kaname-ishi to pin the catfish and prevent it from moving. Many Shinto shrines have marked stones believed to be areas where Takemikazuchi came to subdue the namazu, under the belief that removing or disturbing the stone would free the namazu and lead to an earthquake. Just like Takemikazuchi, Tenshi lives in the heavens beyond the thunderclouds and is easily capable of descending to the surface world, though she lacks any particularly strong association with the element of electricity. When it comes to her weapons, though, the connections to Takemikazuchi are still very evident. Tenshi just so happens to use a sword and keystones as her two weapons of choice, with the original Japanese text referring to these as Hiso no Tsurugi and Kaname-ishi, respectively. While the keystones being named Kaname-ishi is a pretty obvious nod to Takemikazuchi, things get a bit more interesting with her sword. A tsurugi is a type of Japanese sword, and unlike the more recognizable katana or tachi, which were probably first perfected in the 11th century, the tsurugi is a double-edged sword with a straight blade instead of a curved one, closely resembling a Chinese jian sword. The tsurugi was the preferred blade of choice for Takemikazuchi, as woodblock prints of him with a sword near exclusively go for a straight blade over a curved one. Though Tenshi's sword of Hiso has more of a flame shape to it, when stationary, it is in fact a straight double-edged sword. Tenshi's ability is being able to create tremors and manipulating the ground beneath her, as her spell cards vividly illustrate. Even though that's kind of the opposite of Takemikazuchi, it's still similar in spirit, since it can more likely be chalked up to her nonchalant use of the keystones compared to the god she's partially based on. Tenshi's weaponry, alongside her backstory of ascending from human to celestial status, may even be representative of the cosmic trinity of Taoism, the three realms of heaven, represented by the sword of Hiso, earth, represented by the keystones, and man, represented by Tenshi herself. The names of her spell and skill cards in Scarlet Weather Rhapsody and Hiso Tensoku add to this possible connection. The last detail I'd like to discuss with Tenshi is, in essence, a minor one, but still one of note. I'm referring to her sigil in the Grimoire of Marissa, which depicts a lone angel with a horn. An angel with a horn is symbolic of Judgment Day, the end of the world in Christianity and Islam, though it's usually a group of 7 angels to symbolize the 7 stages of the apocalypse. The image of a lone angel signaling the end of the world is more often associated with the Tarot card Judgment, the 20th major arcana. The Judgment Arcana represents inner calling or self-examination, as well as absolution or rebirth, traits that harken back to the etymology of Bhava Agra's name, as well as Tenshi's backstory. Perhaps this sigil design was purposely chosen to reflect Tenshi's ascent from human to celestial, a kind of rebirth, if you may. Tenshi's definitely not an easy character to sit back and piece apart, and that's part of why she's a fascinating addition to the series' roster of characters. She's only had one major appearance in the series as well as its expansion, but that hasn't stopped her from becoming a popular character. In fact, if we're playing favorites here, Tenshi does happen to be my favorite Touhou character, mainly for her brazen confidence and headstrong attitude, but knowing more about the influence from Japanese mythology and history, Chinese folklore, and Buddhism, as well as the possible further inspiration from Taoism and Tarot, all make me admire the effort that went into creating her even more. I'd be more than happy to see the rebellious Celestials show up in another main series or spin-off Touhou game, though hopefully she may be a playable character again. This has been Character Development. Thank you so much for watching, and you can thank Hellfire00011 for suggesting Tenshi. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to Moy Wolf, for the artwork of Tenshi used in this video and its thumbnail. I've included links to his Twitter and Pixiv accounts in the description, if you'd like to see more of his work and support his art. If you enjoyed this episode, then please feel free to like the video and type your thoughts in the comments. If you're new to the series, you can also subscribe to be notified of new episodes. And if you'd like to see the previous episode on Naoto Shirogane from Persona 4, you can use the on-screen annotation on the right. But if you'd like to watch something a little different, why not use the annotation on the left to check out MC Profit's video series on Symbolism and Mother 3. It's spoiler-heavy, but very thorough and thought-provoking. Thanks again for watching, and take care, everyone!